You know, if you've ever cracked open a psychology textbook, you've almost certainly run into the name Phineas Gage, right? He's that guy. The one who had a giant iron rod shoot straight through his head and somehow lived. But here's the thing. That classic story we all learned, the one about the nice guy who instantly turned into a total monster? Well, it turns out that might not be the real story at all. So let's get into it. Let's really unpack one of the most famous and maybe one of the most misunderstood cases in the history of neuroscience.
And this is the quote that basically built the legend. It comes from Gage's own doctor, John Harlow. But get this, it was written a full 20 years after the accident happened. He said the balance between his intellectual faculties and animal propensities had been destroyed. Wow, pretty dramatic, right? I mean, it paints this picture of a man just completely broken, his raw animal side totally taking over. And that one idea, that single sentence, is really the seed of the whole myth, the idea that he was, quote, no longer Gage. But to really get a handle on what changed, we've got to know who he was before all this went down.
So, who was Phineas Gage back in 1848? Well, at 25 years old, he was pretty much the exact opposite of a monster. He was a railroad foreman up in Vermont, and people really respected him. They talked about his iron will, his sharp business sense. In fact, his bosses thought he was the best they had, their most efficient and capable foreman. This was the guy they trusted with the really dangerous jobs and with keeping his whole crew safe. He was, by all accounts, the definition of a competent, reliable guy. And this was the tool of his trade. And let's be clear, this wasn't just some random crowbar, it was a custom-made tamping iron. I mean, just look at these specs. We're talking about a piece of steel that's over 3.5 feet long, weighing a hefty 13.25 pounds. Just try to picture that for a moment. This massive, heavy-duty iron rod was about to play the starring role in a bizarre one-in-a-million accident that would literally change how we think about the human brain.
Okay, so what was he even doing? Well, this was the standard but super dangerous procedure for blasting rock. You can see the steps here. First, you drill a hole, then you pour in the blasting powder and stick in a fuse. The really important part is next. You add sand or clay on top. That's key because it makes sure the explosion goes down into the rock, not up. The final step is to tamp it all down. And it was right at that critical moment that Gage got distracted. His crew called out to him, he turned his head for just a second, and that's when it all went wrong.
So in that split second of distraction, he thought the sand was already in. He brought the tamping iron down, but instead of hitting soft sand, it hit hard rock, a spark. And just like that, bam, the blasting powder detonated. That 13-pound iron rod became a missile. It shot straight up, went in through his left cheek, tore through the front of his brain, and blew out the top of his skull. And get this, they found it a staggering 25 yards away. Just incredible.
So, he's dead, right? I mean, no way you survived that. Except he did. And this is where the story goes from unbelievable to just impossible. Within minutes of having a metal pole rocket through his head, he was conscious. He was talking. He was even walking, with a little help, to get into a cart. He sat up for the whole ride back to his hotel, and when the doctor finally showed up, Phineas Gage supposedly looked at him and said, "Doctor, here is business enough for you." I mean, he just can't make this stuff up.
All right, so this is the part of the story you probably know. This is the no longer Gage syndrome, straight from the textbooks. According to that report from Dr. Harlow years later, the personality change was just massive. Socially, he started cussing a lot, became really irreverent, didn't show much respect for anyone. In terms of just getting things done, what we call executive function, he couldn't stick to a plan to save his life. And his emotions? Totally all over the place. Impatient one minute, stubborn the next. It's no wonder his friends started saying, he's no longer Gage.
And for more than 100 years, that's pretty much where the story stopped. He was seen as this incredible medical miracle, sure, but a complete social tragedy. A man who survived the unsurvivable, only to lose himself. But is that really the whole story? What if there's more to it? Because when you start digging into the evidence we have now, a much more complicated and honestly a much more inspiring picture starts to emerge.
Yeah, this whole idea that he just became some aimless, dysfunctional guy, it just doesn't square with the facts. Because a few years later, in 1852, he gets a job, a really, really demanding job. For 7 years, he was a long-distance stagecoach driver in Chile. Now, just stop and think about what that actually involves. You've got the technical skill of handling a team of 6 horses. You've got the logistical challenge of a 13-hour, 110-mile route every single day. And you're constantly dealing with people, collecting fares, making conversation. These are not simple tasks. These are high-level cognitive skills, the exact skills the old story says he completely lost.
So how do we explain this? Well, it's led to a new theory called the social recovery hypothesis. And the idea is pretty brilliant, actually. It suggests that this highly structured, repetitive job was kind of like a natural form of rehabilitation for his brain. Think about it. Every single day, he had a clear set of tasks, a strict schedule, and he had to interact with people in a functional way. This daily routine may have actually helped him relearn and rebuild the social and planning skills that the injury had damaged. He wasn't just broken, he was adapting, he was recovering.
And if you need a visual for this new understanding of Gage, here it is. For a century and a half, the only picture we had of him was this sort of creepy, sterile life mask made after his death. But then, not that long ago, in 2008, this photo surfaced. And it just changes everything. This isn't some messy, confused drifter. This is a well-dressed man who looks confident, self-assured. And look, he's holding the tamping iron, not hiding it in shame, but holding it almost like a badge of honor. This isn't the face of a monster. This is the face of a survivor.
So just as our picture of the man himself has evolved, so has our scientific understanding of his actual brain injury. It's been a long road, you know? Back in 1868, it was all based on Harlow's observations. Fast forward to 1994, and computer models suggested both frontal lobes were hit. Then, in 2004, a big leap. CT scans of the actual skull showed, nope, the damage was only in the left frontal lobe. That was huge. But the real game changer, the moment we finally got the full picture, came in 2012 with some incredible new technology.
So using this new imaging, scientists could finally see exactly what that iron rod did. And what they found was absolutely mind-blowing. Look at this breakdown. He only lost about 4% of his gray matter. Think of gray matter as the cities in your brain, the clusters of brain cells that do the processing. But he lost 11% of his white matter. That's the interstate highway system, all the wiring that connects those cities. So the big takeaway wasn't about the brain cells that were destroyed. It was about the crucial connections that were severed.
And this leads us to the modern diagnosis, disconnection syndrome. It's the perfect name for it. That tamping iron basically acted like a wrecking ball on the brain's communication network. It severed those critical pathways, those superhighways, linking the parts of his brain that handle emotion with the parts that handle rational thought and social control. So his intellect, his ability to reason, was mostly okay, but the connection was lost. The part of him that would normally say, hey, maybe don't say that out loud, was offline, and that explains everything. It's why he could plan a complex 110-mile journey, but still struggle with basic social rules.
So, when you put it all together, what is Phineas Gage's legacy? Well, it's huge, even with all these new details. For one, his case was really the first hard proof that specific parts of the brain, the frontal lobes, are tied to personality. That helped kill off bogus ideas like phrenology. He also paved the way for modern theories about how our emotions and our ability to reason are deeply connected. But there's a dark side, too. The simplistic version of his story, man has brain injury, becomes difficult, was tragically used to justify horrific procedures like the lobotomy. So his impact is really complex.
So in the end, Phineas Gage's skull is like a map. It's helped us uncover so many secrets about how the brain works, how personality, reason, and emotion are all wired together. But here's a final thought. The story of his skull is one thing, but what about the story we tell about him? The fact that it's changed so much over the years, from a simple monster story to a complex tale of recovery, what does that evolution reveal about us, about how we see the world, how science works, and how we're always searching for a more complete truth?